January 1st, 2024. Live streaming from a distant galaxy, this is the world's most controversial podcast, the Doomsy McDoomscroller Show, a philosophical science fiction series featuring realistic futurology and refreshingly heretical commentary on the news. And here's a piece from the New York Post. This is from a couple days ago. Not quite old. Maybe not breaking news. And what is this with the headline anyways? Main Dem who booted Trump from ballot met with Biden. Called Electoral College white supremacy. Okay, now it seems like they're trying to cast her in a bad light. But here's the thing. Both of those are facts. So what are they are they implying something there? I mean, the whole electoral college thing is a slavery scam. And Americans still do it. It's set up for slavery. It's set up to support the institution of slavery in the USA. And y'all still vote like that. So that's the reason. That's the entire reason why a lot of voters in the USA are stressed about the Republican Party, because that's how they get into the White House. They don't win the popular vote. They get in through the slavery scam. And yet, that's just how it's going to be. Oh, well, we'd have to ratify or an amendment or something, or change the Constitution, or, I mean, come on. Your culture was never meant to be fair. Ever. I'm not talking just American culture. I mean, you can go before. You can go back before you set up all the voting, you Americans. U.S. of A. there, before your Constitution. You know, how was it fair? How was it land of the free? A bunch of holy war agriculturalists sweeping westward across the continent in a tsunami of genocide and slavery. Now, not to knock the USA, that's simply how every single civilized nation on Earth came about. So, yeah, white supremacy, but this white supremacy, let me just say, because this Crayola color white has been brought into it, there is no such thing as race. There is no such thing as race. Every government document, every form, everything that mentions race, and they conflate race, ethnicity, and land masses all in one, and then they put a Crayola color on people. Very simple box of crayons, right? There's only 2 or 3 colors in that box of crayons. And then I guess you got these quasi pseudo colors that are for land masses, continents and things like that, islands, whatever. So white supremacy is That's what makes white supremacy the dumbest thing, because there's no such thing as white. There can't be any kind of supremacy. There's no such thing as race among human beings. You're all the same kind of, well, in this respect, I can say we, because I'm a human. Now, I'm not part of civilized culture, mind you. I've been away from for so long now. Unfortunately, I had to leave the planet to get away from civilized culture. So I'm not civilized folk anymore, but I am human. And so I should include, I should use the first person plural here. And we are all the same kind of earthling, mammal, primate, simian. I mean, we're all the same. Exact same kind of creature. Homo sapiens. So there are no colors. But yeah, so the Maine, the Secretary of State in Maine said the Electoral College. Let's get a little more of the quote here. So Doomsy scrolling down now for those who don't get the video feed of this. Reportedly once referred to the Electoral College as a quote relic of white supremacy. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Relic, though, I mean, it's like, it's still active. It's still going on. That's how you get Republicans in modern times in the White House. So, this strange. And this paper just, I mean, of course, it's New York Post. I make no comment on that. I mean, that's just a fact. The Electoral College is set up to support the slavery scam. Maybe here's what I'm feeling right now. That as a kid, I mean, how many of us have been told by our parents when we were kids, life isn't fair, right? And that was just an answer for something that just shut the whole thing down. Whatever the issue was, life isn't fair, right? Well, let's question that. I mean, that's not really accurate. In fact, that's deceptively inaccurate. Maybe even detrimentally inaccurate. Because it's not life that isn't fair. It's your culture that isn't fair. Your culture. I'm not just talking American culture. I'm not talking West versus East or anything. I'm talking your culture. Civilized culture. Civilized with capital C. Your culture isn't fair. How can pyramid building for a pharaoh, how can that be fair? This is not. Speaking of pharaohs and pyramids in ancient Egypt, here we go. This is more news. More news off CNN here. CNN.com World Asia. Massive earthquake hits western Japan, triggering tsunami warnings. And we'll get down here into the article here. Earthquake struck at 4:10 p.m. local time at a depth of 10 kilometers, 6 miles, in the Noto Peninsula of Ishikawa Prefecture. Don't know if I'm pronouncing Ishikawa right. 10 kilometers it struck. 6 miles deep, 10 kilometers. Now, y'all know that. Y'all know that now, today. But your culture, and again, I'm talking about the 8 billion of you. Your culture, in the broadest sense of the term culture, I'm talking about the 8 billion of you, the 10,000-year-old culture. You know, the one that's doing its best to cause a mass extinction on the planet right now. Your culture. Your culture, for thousands and thousands of years, for, well, at least 9 or 10, or the vast majority of the time your culture's been around, there was no geology. There wasn't science. You didn't have geologists. You have no idea where an earthquake strikes other than just by what you see around you at the time. You know, if you're a civilized person, you're a farmer somewhere a couple thousand years ago, earthquake hits, and you say it's an earthquake, you know, you might use similar language. The earth is shaking, but it's not like the earth that's doing it, because let's hypothesize a time before geologists. So it's the gods. The gods are angry. And they're shaking the earth. Now, I bring this up because, in a way, this is kind of has something to do with war. That ignorance, the ignorance of your ancestors, is just as much an indictment on you all as it was on them. I mean, you might think that, well, hey, Doomsy, so they didn't have geologists, so, you know, fix that, right? We got science now. We know what's up with that. But there's more to it than that. Because let's go back, not just to any time of your history. Let's go back to the very beginning of civilized culture. Right? The first farmers there in the Fertile Crescent. Okay, suffice to say that morons, misogynistic morons, ignoramuses. That's who started your culture. They started farming. Now, agriculture had been around in various places long before the agricultural revolution. It was more the farming revolution, a very specific kind of agriculture. Okay, now, those people, the start of civilized culture, they thought themselves able to conquer a planet. After thousands of years of trying to do so, people eventually, some groups of people eventually started telling stories about it, and eventually writing came about, and people wrote the story down about y'all trying to conquer the planet, trying to rule over a whole planet. So that's the indictment on you all right now in the 21st century, is what I'm talking about. is you're doing what these ignoramuses were doing. They didn't know what lightning was. They didn't know that a flood. They didn't know that an earthquake was of the earth. It was from the earth. They didn't know your ancestors, your cultural foundation had no clue about what a storm was. Or even germs. Didn't know what sickness was all about. That's how incredibly ignorant your ancestors were. And here's, I guess this is what I'm getting at. That ignorance is what fed the delusion of grandeur upon which your entire existence is based. Everything you do throughout the entire day, every little bit, every task, things that you think, it's the web of mythology and culture is just woven through every society and covers every person like a tapestry. You're born into it. You're doing, like, there was no rethinking of civilized culture when it was realized that the earth was responsible for earthquakes. And there should have been some rethinking going on, because ignorance is what fueled the delusion of grandeur upon which your culture is based. Imagine if geologists were around, if geologists or almost any scientist was around in the Fertile Crescent back, 10, 12,000 years ago at the startup. So when those people started thinking, hey, you know what? We're like gods. And we look like gods. We have the power of gods. The gods gave us this planet. We should conquer this planet. The gods want us to rule over this planet. Yeah, the English translated from ancient Hebrew, if you want to look at one particular story of the beginning of all that, is subdue and have dominion. But you don't really need people describing the behavior of civilized folk thousands of years ago. You don't need those descriptions. Tell you what what civilized culture does. Just look around you. Just look around. All the pollution, all the destruction. Civilized culture is literally all about subjugation. Subjugation of earth, and thereby subjugation of women. Civilized culture is about subjugation. The worst culture ever in the history of humanity. By far. And it's ridiculous. You can't control a planet. A hurricane can make the Mississippi River flow backwards. A hurricane can make the Mississippi River flow backwards. I'm not even going to Google. I've seen that article. Maybe I've even done it on the show before. But you all can't make try to make the Mississippi River go backwards. You can't. You can't get it to flow backwards. How are you going to do that? Hurricane does it, no problem. And what you're gonna, your culture, that's the opponent. That's the thing to be conquered. Look, you're not going to conquer plate tectonics. You're not going to conquer hurricanes. Your culture is based on a delusion of grandeur that was, I think, made possible through just sheer ignorance. Yeah, also fed probably by an awareness of being an apex predator. But really, it was a religious thing that occurred. The agricultural revolution. I mean, it's called a revolution. It wasn't technology, it wasn't innovation. People knew how to regrow their preferred foods. People knew that. They knew how to do that. Agricultural revolution was a religious revolution. It wasn't agriculture, it was farming. It was a very specific type of agriculture. Probably most aptly labeled holy war agriculture. So this all goes back. You know, trying to conquer a planet, building pyramids, cultivating pharaohs, and a complete disconnect with reality, even now. So, you know, we can look at this article about the earthquake and say, oh, we have geologists now. But such intelligence, such knowledge still doesn't solve a lot of problems. Look at this. Here we go. This is kind of news. Look at this, I should say, listen to this, right? It's a podcast. But there is a video feed for this. Okay, this is LLU.SE. This is an article from Linkoping University. I think I might not be saying that right. But the URL looks like it's LLU.SE. And this is about hydroponics. Headline is Electronic Soil Enhances Crop Growth. And now this technology is all fine and dandy, but I want to get down, and this is from December 27th. 2023, so from like 4 or 5 days ago. And there's a photo of people in lab gear in a laboratory, gloves on and beakers, and they're talking about hydroponics. But what I want to get to here is in this article about the technological breakthrough, supposedly written by a journalist who at least talked to some scientists. But here's what these scientists are saying. This is what people, this is very common among academics. The world population is increasing, and we also have climate change. So it's clear that we won't be able to cover the food demands of the planet with only the already existing agricultural methods. But with hydroponics, we can blah, 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 blah. Okay, it says Eleni Stavronidou, associate professor at the Laboratory of Organic Electronics at Linkoping University and leader of the Electronic Plants Group. Impressive tech and all that, but what's with this ignorance here? This is now the year 2024. He goes almost into the second quarter century. of the millennia. The world population is increasing, and we also have climate. It's clear that we won't be able to cover the food demands of the planet with only the already existing agricultural methods. That's just wrong. That's just wrong. Okay, here's something. January 1st. World population up 75 million this year, standing at 8 billion on January 1st. Oh, this is from a couple days ago. Hey, we're 8 billion. Okay, so y'all are at 8 billion now. Maybe I said we before, but I'm not. I'm in another galaxy. I'm trying to get back to Earth. You can see on my control interface, I have an overlay on my visor that keeps Earth front and center in my mind. I'm trying to make it back to Earth. I'm not there now. I'm not going to say the number of humans. I'm going to say the number of civilized humans on Earth. Right now is 8 billion. Okay? 8 billion. Now, about 47 years ago, say maybe, I don't know, somewhere, maybe it was more like, let's just say 1975. There were 4 billion civilized people on Earth. 4 billion civilized people. 4 billion. Now there's 8. Okay, it's doubled in about 47 years. 47 to 49 years, doubling of the population. But let's just go back to like 1975 in our minds. And there's 4 billion people. Okay, 4 billion people. Now, everyone's in 1975, so at the end of 1975, there were 4 billion people, or let's say there are 4 billion people also at the beginning of 1975, and a bit more, of course, at the end of 1975, but that's approximately, let's pick a point in time, whatever it was, whenever it was, when the number was 4 billion. Okay, 4 billion civilized people on Earth. Okay. At that point, there was, I don't know, X amount of food. Whatever amount of food the 4 billion of you consumed in that 1975-ish year, just add it all up. I don't know how many bajillions of tons of food. Whatever amount it is, let's just call it X, or that's Twitter now. Let's call it full package. So you have just the full package of food. That's a huge package, right? But that food, that's enough for 4 billion people. We know that because there were 4 billion of you in 1975. You had 4 billion. So the food that produced that year, produced and consumed, that was enough to support 4 billion. Let's call it K amount. Instead of X. As a variable, we'll use K. Okay, K. Okay, so that was 1975. Now let's suppose that in 1976, you also produced K amount of food. And in 1977, again, the same amount of food was produced, which was proven in 1975 to be enough for 4 billion people. Okay, demonstrably enough food for 4 billion people. So every year after that, he produced the same amount, K amount of food. Each year, 76, 77, 78, 79, 1980, you produce K amount of food, which is enough food, as proven in 1975, it was enough food for 4 billion people. And each year, this is a parallel universe. Right? Each year you were producing the same amount. If that was the case, okay, let's just imagine if that was the case. It wasn't. It wasn't the case. But let's say it was. Every single year it was K amount. Okay, by 1985, 1990, every year K amount of food, which in 1975 was enough to keep 4 billion people alive and breathing, alive and kicking on planet Earth as members of your culture. K amount. So 1990, come year 2000, year 2020, year 2020. If you are always producing just K amount of food every year, what would your population be right now? It would be 4 billion. 4 billion. Because people are made of food. There's only enough food for 4 billion people, it's impossible to have 5 billion people. It's impossible. Since 1975, if you had always been producing that K amount of food, whatever it was, for 4 billion, your population would have been going between 3.9 and 4.1 billion. It would have stabilized. It would have leveled out. 4 billion. Now, some might think 4 billion's too many people, which, I would be inclined to agree. But 4 billion, when it was 4 billion, who looked around and thought, you know what we need? You know what would really be better for this? Twice as many people. Were there any world, quote unquote, leaders who pushed that initiative? Hey, we should have twice as many people all competing in the same exact way as we all do. So it's ridiculous for these scientists to say, "Oh, look at the graph. We've got a growing population. We should increase food production." These are bright minds. These are intelligent people. Yet they think they aren't thinking, really. It's a complete disconnect with reality. And they shouldn't be so bad at math that they can't figure it out. Increasing food production is what fuels population growth. That's the only way it can be. Here's what we know for sure about your culture right now is worldwide, you've produced 2K amount of food. We know that because you have to. If K was the amount of food, whatever that number would be, K is the mystery number. Right. Sorry to hit you with a little bit of algebra like in school, but it's a mystery number. I'm not going to search for that. I'm not going to Google that. It's just it's only going to be an estimate anyways, right? Whatever it is. Call it K. So it was enough for 4 billion people. The only way you can have 8 billion people is have at least 2K amount of food. You have to have that much food. So you doubled food production. Food production doubled. That's why you have 8 billion people now. Now, of course, it didn't double every year. It grew a few percentage points each year. But throughout year after year after year after year, an increase of a few percentage points, you're always increasing the production of food surpluses. They always increase the production of food surpluses. Your population always grows. There's a complete disconnect. It's the year 2024, and you still have scientists who are blinded by the mythology of civilized culture. This is mythology. Won't be able to cover the food demands of the planet. This is the quote. So it's clear, the scientist says, so it's clear that we won't be able to cover the food demands of the planet with only the... Okay, well, first off, let's not speak for the planet, all right? Okay, I know maybe by the planet you're talking about civilized culture, the number of y'all. Over 8 billion now. Well, you won't be able to cover the food demands of the planet. That's because your culture always demands a surplus. An increasing surplus. That's the demand of your culture. So, yeah. You wouldn't have to grow more food if you didn't demand it. You wouldn't have to have millionaires amongst you if you didn't believe it was in your DNA. But that's a whole nother rant. All right, before Doomsy signs off here, because I know I'm in a distant galaxy, but I do have Wi-Fi back to original internet on Earth. So I'm going to try to catch the Rose Bowl. You got something to say, you can send us, send the producers a voice message. You want your voice heard on the show. Questions, comments. Just go to www.doomsymcdoomscroller.com.